And we are live. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Steve. Good morning.
How are you this morning?
Doing great. Yourself?
I'm doing great. Well, welcome. Welcome everybody. I am Steve 𝐄𝐧𝐠. I am the co-founder and CTO of Software Velocity Partners. And I talk about software operational excellence in all my posts. And today is part of a long series of trying to, get some good themes out there of how companies can improve their software development, quality engineering, and DevOps operations, make them much more efficient and much more effective. So today, I am very pleased to have Dave Allen here with me. Dave Allen and I go back a ways. He is currently the Senior Director of Quality Engineering at Dell EMC. He's quite a guy. He's a hands-on leader with extensive experience in software development, quality engineering, and DevOps operations at the enterprise level and high mid-market. He started like myself as a software developer. He actually was a kernel developer. He worked with commercial databases, making them work on symmetric multiprocessor systems. He wrote network operating system services. He designed and delivered a myriad of software innovative products with exceptional quality to market. And Dave worked his way up through technical management ladder, including a role as business operations lead and chief of staff. Later, he joined SunGard with me, leading quality engineering, DevOps, agile development, security, the development and engineering labs, documentation, and shared services for all of SunGard's cloud offerings. In 2018, he returned back to Dell EMC to lead quality engineering for storage products, where he is today. So Dave holds an MBA and multiple technology patents. Actually, he holds 2 with me. Yep. On test automation framework systems. And he thrives on solving problems that improve the experience of customers. And take note of that. That's an important part, because that's really what it's all about. Dave is also an expert bass guitarist and frequently plays for the Timmy Brown Band, a Nashville country music star in the making. For anybody local may have seen him at playing at Patriots Place, or even caught him at halftime against when Patriots played against Tennessee Titans last year or 2 years ago. He also plays with Andrew McManus and the Tim Bono bands, and he's so you got to catch him if anybody's local. All right, so besides being super smart and super talented, Dave is the kind of guy who gets it. He sees things holistically from the customer, business, technical, people, and process perspectives. He really looks at things holistically, and there's not very many folks like him out there. And on top of that, he's a microbrewery aficionado, or a very good tester. All right, I'm not done embarrassing yet. So that's the intro for Dave. That's his background. But I promised Dave that I would remind him how we met back in the day, because he didn't remember, but I did. Okay. All right, so Dave's company was bought by EMC, and then their company, and then they moved everybody over to the same building that I was working in at EMC. And so we were doing some, just kind of integration and fun stuff. And we got the group together and said, hey, why don't we go play some flag football in the local field in Milford? And so I don't know if you remember this, but
I do now.
You do now, right? So I'm like, so we kind of divided up people on teams, and so I was the quarterback on one team, and Dave happened to be on my team. And I'm looking around and I'm saying, okay, this guy looks tall and athletic, so I'm just going to throw him the ball. So I did first play. I, I threw him a bomb, and he caught it and ran for a touchdown. I think you caught a couple more, but anyway, we've been friends ever since.
I did not remember that story at all, but now that you bring it up, yep.
All right. Great. Anyway, I thought that
long time ago, Steve. That's like 30 years ago.
No. It's not 30. It was
getting there.
1997.
Okay.
Not bad. All right. Well, let's get to the topic of our day. All right. So, the title is "Stop the Busy Work." Really, we see a lot of folks doing a lot of busy work, and and a lot of companies. Sorry, they do a lot of busy work because they think that's their path to product readiness and quality readiness. So, Dave, clearly you're an expert in quality engineering and DevOps, especially at the enterprise scale, but you're really hands-on and you're in the thick of it across a number of products where data integrity, availability, resiliency, durability, and privacy, performance, and scalability are very critical. And in many cases, they're mission critical. So you have to be on your game 24/7. But not all software companies have all those non-functional requirements or the intensity or the degree of those requirements. However, most of them have more than they think.
Yeah.
But the bigger problem is how they think about product quality and readiness in many cases is superficial and off basis. So I'd like to get your thoughts on how companies think about product quality and quality readiness.
Well, so what you say is true, and many times there's an enormous amount of attention put on the development of code itself, and then not enough attention put on whether that code is actually going to perform, be resilient in the field, etc. So, a few things that I would say, like, okay, as you mentioned, I have a quality leadership role for Dell right now, but not speaking as a Dell guy, speaking as a guy who's got like 40 years of, hard knocks in this industry.
Exactly.
Hard learning. Is usually the code process of developing the actual code itself, it really is only half the battle, right? It's not 3/4 of the battle. It's at best half the battle. And then the question is, how is that code actually going to perform, and are you ready for it to perform? And there are a number of characteristics of that. Now, first of all, I'll just say manual testing, forget about it, right? Automation is the only way to go, and just for a simple reason that what you can do and your throughput quantity of testing, if you're manual testing, it's limited by people. And they sleep at night and they take a lot of weekends off and that kind of stuff. And I always say your automation never needs to sleep. So that's the first. The second advantage to automation.
That's music to my ears, by the way.
Absolutely. And the second advantage to automation is that you can just do it and 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 do it, right? And you have the opportunity to purposely do it until it breaks. For example, I'll give you an example of a team that they created a snap every second, and then they deleted a snap every second. And they did it constantly to see how far could they go until it broke. And the answer was 22 days. And you can't do that with manual testing. To find out where are the limits of what you've developed, and to understand how it's really going to perform in stressful situations, right? So that's just like a baseline. Automate. And then the second tenet there is your functional automation is lovely, but it's not enough. Right? Functional testing, of course, you have to have it. But That's not it. There's so many more dimensions to what you need to understand and test. Negative testing, performance testing, looking for performance change over time as you develop code and additional versions. You need to know, is it performing as you expected? You need to know, first of all, a lot of teams don't even have performance requirements documented, let alone performance baseline that they then measure against. It's a critical.
I would even contend that most companies don't have many of their non-functional requirements documented.
True.
In which case, if you don't even have them documented or elaborated, then how could you possibly come up with a test strategy to exasperate it, validate it, and verify it, and make your customers happy?
Right, right. You know, one of the things that you and I have talked about is when you're developing a commercial product, in other words, you're going to ship a product, someone's going to install that product at their site. You know, really what you're doing is you're releasing a product into the wild. Okay. So you had your use cases and scenarios in mind, and hopefully you did a pretty good job, but you have to understand you're releasing the product into the wild. And I always say, like, if you've got a horse is a very utilitarian animal. It can survive in a lot of conditions. It can perform a lot of tasks. It can do a lot of things. If you move that horse to the Antarctica and set it up with the polar bears, that horse is not going to last very long. Right? But and literally, that, despite the fact that you're trying to do RPQs and qualifications with customers, et cetera, when you're releasing a product into the wild, that horse is going in with the polar bears. So you need to have thought about it. And sometimes, of course, you learn the hard way that it doesn't do it. Now, when you're developing cloud-based products, cloud services, you do have a little bit more control over that environment. In that you have control over the fact that your horse is not going to be put in Antarctica with the polar bear.
Right.
And you're responsible for that environment. So, however,
but what you can't control is how somebody's going to ride that horse. They could go backwards, upside down, or whatever, right?
No, you're right on. You don't have as much control as you might hope over what's going to actually happen with that horse. And that horse is going to be exposed to some things in the natural environment, like there are bobcats and mountain lions and ravines and all kinds of stuff, right? So you still actually have the problem of how is that thing going to be used, and that's where you've really got to get into some concepts around longevity testing, chaos testing, and by the way, it's really, really helpful if you can have a regular dialogue with your customers about their use case. And the ideal, Steve, is if you've got a customer that's close, like you have a trust relationship, and they understand maybe that you're not at your full MVP that you want yet. Right. If you can involve that customer in your sprint reviews, my goodness, what a gold mine, because they'll tell you, you thought you had the requirements, and by the way, very often where you actually went wrong is the requirements, right? Where you were incomplete, you didn't fully understand. So you've done all your requirements, your due diligence that you thought, you've done your design, but in your sprint reviews, if you can actually show a trusted customer where you were at and get their feedback, wow.
Yeah, so one of the thoughts I always have is why do companies get this wrong? What are they looking at? And why do they think what they're looking at makes their product ready?
Okay, all right. So a couple of factors there. That's a phenomenal question. Usually it's because there's a date.
Yeah.
And people are maze wise, and they know they're in trouble if they don't meet the date.
Exactly.
And by the way, at one point in my career, I ran a user interface group. And I had a sign on the wall in my office, and it said, "The sweetness of meeting the date fades quickly. The bitterness of poor usability lingers forever.
You know, it's great, but a lot of companies are still so unaware of these factors. You know, they're
Sure.
You know, I mean, one of the challenges I have is because I'm trying to when I go to companies, you know, I try to make them aware that they're not looking at things and not observing, and they're not looking at the right metrics and
Great.
and
Yeah.
you know, so what are the things that you found and that you found helpful, and
Yeah.
what can we do about it, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a complicated topic, right?
I know.
Because very often to support meeting the date, people are looking at their test pass rates. For example, let's talk about test pass rates for a moment and my philosophy on test pass rates. So, first of all, if your test pass rates are 70%, you're not ready and it's no good. So then the question is, what if your test pass rates are 100%?
Mm-hmm.
And my view has always been, maybe that tells me you're ready. Maybe, but I need more, because we already know people can write tests that pass.
Mm-hmm.
And we also know that many of the tests that are run just don't find the subtleties that are going to come out either through, I mentioned before, longevity testing,
Mm-hmm.
chaos testing, performance stress, right? Scalability. Right. So again, if you're just looking at if you're just looking at pass rates alone, you're kind of hiding from yourself that you might not really be ready.
Yeah.
So you start to look at some other things. You want to look at things like deferrals. Am I moving my technical debt? First, am I moving my technical debt to exposing my customers to it? That's a good question.
Yeah.
And then the second is, am I just moving my technical debt down the line, which is going to impede my velocity for the next iteration or version that I want to do? Because now I'm just saddling it with all this incomplete work. So, my philosophy is deferrals, don't do it. Like, so, and of course, I'm a realist, right?
Well, there's another side effect of deferrals, right?
Yeah.
The big side effect is that deferrals have to be fenced off. And if they're not fenced off, I mean completely fenced off from ever being executed, because a lot of people just say, "Oh, we're not fixing it," and that's fencing. But that hasn't. But a customer or somebody could get to that functionality inadvertently.
Yes, that's true. And again, on that topic, my philosophy has been, if a deferral is found in the field, it's a failure of the deferral process.
Right. Yes.
You didn't properly assess.
Yeah.
And these things are disruptive to customers.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, I want to go back to something you started to say, which is, hey, you can look at 70% of your tests executed, and you're not done.
Yeah, you're not done.
And you also could be looking at 100%, and you could be throwing up your hands and saying, well, maybe I'm done. So, to me, that says, well, how good are your tests? Not how good, how effective.
How effective, yeah.
Are your tests, test suites, test cases, CI/CD process?
Yeah.
How effective is it in clearly not just the functional, but all of the customer requirements, which is, like you said, 50% is non-functional, and or SLAs that your software has to meet, performance, usability, like if you have to click 40 times to get to the service or feature that you really want to do, it works, but that's really annoying,
Oh, it certainly is. I'll take you back to a story. I ran this user interface team years ago, late 90s.
Yeah.
And so what we used to do is take people who were not involved in the development of the GUI, and we'd put them in a room with a video camera on them, and we would give them on a piece of paper an outcome, an objective, not steps, absolutely not steps, an outcome. And then we would film them as they explored this new user interface. How did they get there? How long did it take them to figure out how to get there? How many paths did they go down? And it's like, oh, that isn't it, right? And then so that's kind of usability 101, is take somebody who doesn't know what they're doing and see how they do.
I did that same experiment for doing an installation.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, I made my boss and her staff do it.
Nice.
They were horrified. Only one person could actually finish it.
Awesome.
And we cut that process down. It was exactly what I was hoping. We cut the process from 20 pages of documentation down to 4.
Yep. Cool. Yeah. All right. So let me throw in a few more about, we said maybe you passed 100% of your tests.
Yep.
I'm still skeptical. So, I'm looking for other things, other indicators of discipline and hygiene. And there are many. For example, a simple one is, did you run it through code scrubber like a SonarQube or Coverity? Mm-hmm. Did you respond to what it said? Are you running it through security checkers looking for known security vulnerabilities? Really, there's a rich portfolio of checking that you can do. And of course, back, when you and I started coding, we didn't have these tools. And I always say, we were sticks and stones in those days. Yep. Now that these tools are commercially available, mm-hmm. It's almost irresponsible not to be using them to their full effect. Right.
Right.
So I look for those disciplines. I look for hygienes. For example, again, you've got a project in Jira, and you've got your epics of what you're trying to deliver. You've got stories. You got tasks. And somebody tells me that they think they're ready. A really quick, and you and I did this at SunGard. A really quick look at Jira will tell you whether they're ready by the disciplines, right? You start looking at stories. They think they're done. You look at stories that are in incomplete states, tasks that are not complete, definition of done that hasn't been met. Okay, like the discussion is over immediately. Right? Are you ready? You're not ready.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
You just proved to me you're not ready. But then, let's assume that everything is ticked and tied. It's really, your journey to readiness doesn't begin at the end, right? Okay.
So true.
It begins at the beginning, right? Starting with requirements analysis and decomposition. Like, when I see requirements and I read a paragraph, like, it makes my head explode of, wait a second, in this paragraph, can you tell me the discrete testable requirements?
Right.
Because it's just a paragraph of words. Worst, I'll tell you a horrible example, which is, I was actually talking with a developer about a particular set of functionality. And I asked the developer, do you have access to is there a requirements system where this is documented? And the answer, yes. I was like, okay. Well, do you have access to that system where it's documented? No. Excuse me? Who has access to what the actual requirement is? Oh, my manager. It's like, okay, so how did you know what to code? Oh, my manager told me. You blew it at the start.
So, right? So Dave, I just want to interject one more time, because that I'm from Boston, and this is what we do for our style of communication is we interrupt all the time. So I'm apologizing for growing up in Boston. This is one of the first things I do whenever I go to either a company to work or to do an engagement is actually I'm doing an assessment of their entire development process.
Right.
because most of the time they're asking me to fix like downstream effects. They don't have test automation, or they don't have the right test automation, or they don't have a fully automated DevOps pipeline. And then I start looking and I'm saying, well, how can you possibly do that if you don't have documented requirements, and you don't understand your environments, and you don't understand your non-functional factors? You could put an army of people and battalions of people, and a lot of companies actually start trying to create a fully automated DevOps pipeline, and they run into a wall. They start fixing defects, and then they give up because they really didn't go back to the root cause, which is they don't have good designs, good architecture, good design documentation, and good requirements from a customer. That's
So a couple of philosophical things here. One is, we talked about requirements and requirements decomposition and analysis, right? What does this requirement really mean, and what does it not mean? Right. That's equally important.
Right.
And then
some people also do like a risk analysis along with that documentation, so that they can create the proper tests around them.
Certainly. Yeah, I agree. Understanding your velocity is really important, right?
Yes.
How much do you think you can actually get in there? And actually, it's not a bad process. To a lot of companies put requirements documents, and they list the P0s and the date. Okay. And you're kind of setting it up to fail already, right? You think about the train model for your releases, that it's not going on the train if it's not ready. So if you've already said P0s and dates, you're saying these are the things that have to be on the train, but the train's leaving anyways, right? And so it's not a good recipe.
I could talk about a half a dozen companies that do that, and they still do that, and they still think it's okay.
Right. And so that's where you get all kinds of bad behavior, and things that are not fully ready, and the definition of done is not really met, and et cetera, et cetera. And then philosophically, and you and I did this when we worked together, was you have to have a test plan. A test plan is a contract, right? Because we've both seen what happens when you don't have a test plan. Something goes out in the field, they run into trouble with the customers, and then the finger pointing starts. And by the way, then the closed loop corrective action starts, and usually too often it's like, oh, well, we just didn't test it well enough. Like, stop it, keep going to the left.
Yeah, let me add to that, because I think there's two parts of a test plan. There's the test strategy, which is how you should test it, which sometimes you can't do because of time or because of other factors. You don't have things ready. And then there's the actual test plan for a particular release, which is the resources that you can allocate, what kind of tools you have ready, what kind of framework is in place, what are you capable of doing in this time frame? Because the test strategy, sometimes you say, like we did this, we had a vision of what the test strategy was going to be, but clearly we didn't have the horsepower in our test execution process and tools and automation yet. So we had to build that over time till we got to that. So for particular releases, we said, okay, well, you know what? We only have regression automation, but for some of this non-functional area, we're going to have to put people on that, and they're going to have to do that themselves, And so then as we started to build up our backlog, not our technical debt, it's actually the opposite, our libraries of test automation, then we were able to reduce that manual effort because we had those non-functional test suites available, and they could check performance and durability and other parts of this. So I just want people that the audience to realize is that test plan, people use just test plan singularly when they really should be talking about test strategy and test plan.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Another word about test plans: a lot of organizations have a a test group or specific individuals are identified as testers, and there's an assumption that the test plan is their responsibility or their problem. And I contend not true.
Yep.
It's the organization's problem.
Right.
Right? The developers and the management team have as much stake in the test plan as the people who are actually writing the test plan. And as I mentioned, it's a contract. And if something turns out to be missing from that contract because you got burned,
Yeah.
it's not the testers, it's the organization. That's everybody's fault.
I totally agree. Yeah, another thing that always comes to my mind is, the reason we got into this whole situation is testing. Anything downstream is looked upon as a cost center, right? And when you say, okay, those people own test and quality and delivery, so it's not part of the revenue generation. It's not part of the profit center. And I'm kind of on a evangelist mission right now to educate companies to say, look, reframe your thought process, because you can make this your competitive advantage if you design all of this in as a profit, and think about it as your way to profit and time to revenue and ROI is all based on moving that into the design phase.
Right. You can actually think of it as profit protection.
There you go. That's a great word. Profit protection. That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
So now we've educated everybody, and you've educated the company, and they understand. They understand that there's a real problem. And you started to touch upon some of the things that you can do. I think it comes down to really it's discipline.
It is. It's hygiene and discipline.
Yes.
And those are the things to look for. So one of the interesting things, Steve, that we probably ought to talk about is at some point, as whether it's a cloud offer that you're putting out or a product, you've reached really your critical MVP for adoption, right? And until then, you were putting out versions. You had early adopter customers, and you were putting out versions, and you'd come out with a further development of your core MVP. And you've been telling your customers you got to upgrade to this one now. And 4 months later, you're on this cadence, and you tell the customers again, you got to upgrade to this one now. And but eventually you've reached a product or an offer that's got a level of maturity, and it meets the use cases that your customers have. And so now you have an interesting problem on your hands, which is you want to keep selling your product, and you want to keep attracting new customers and new use cases.
Right.
And so you keep going at new functionality. But in the meantime, you've now got an established customer base who's enjoying the functionality that you already gave them because it meets their needs. And now they don't want your new stuff, right? Now you got a little bit of a problem because very typical what companies do is they'll look at the critical defects that have been found in the field. They'll look at the security vulnerabilities that have been discovered, and they happen all the time, right? That's an ongoing process. And they'll say, oh, I'll just fix it in the latest thing. I'll come with my new version that's due in May. We'll fix those things. But your customers are saying, hold on a second. I don't want that, right? I do want the security remediation. I do want the preventative. I want those critical defect fixes because I don't want to run into that stuff. But I don't want your new functionality. I have an internal process. And my internal process involves evaluating, testing, planning my deployment. And I'm not doing that every 3 or 4 months with you, right? So I'm not taking your unproven functionality, but launch your, right? So then your problem is that they've adopted a version that you put out somewhere along the way. And they want you to support them right there. Yep. And if you've got a rapid development skilled agile environment and you're just putting stuff out on a cadence, you can't support all that stuff. You can't be going backwards and fixing all those different versions that you put out. Now you get a problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I 100% agree. In fact, one of the things that, we did, and we also, it's incorporated in our patent, really, which is, it's the, the environment. So I just look at it. Okay, this company is on release, 1.1, and have versions up to 4 or 5, and they have multiple dot releases in between. But when you have to support something that back then, you have to bring in everything that's associated with it into a stack.
Well, it's a very expensive thing to do.
And if you don't have automation and you don't have tagging and so you need the compute, you need the storage, you need all of the levels of operating system, the levels of microcode, the test cases that were associated back then. I mean, all the libraries, all the open source libraries that you incorporated, any components that third-party APIs, at all of those versions. So it's like you have to take a full snapshot of that whole environment, put it on a automated, library of some sort, right? And then when the customers come back in, you have to bring it in and figure out those changes and the impact of those changes, as well, and as being able to add new tests in that environment. Yeah. So then you look at your manpower.
Right.
Yep. How many people can you actually, how many releases can you actually support, and are you going to violate your SLAs?
Right. Sorry. So my thinking is you can't do it. So you have to change the paradigm. You have to make a deal. Yep. And the deal is you can't change the fact that you need to keep doing your cadence releases with new functionality to drive new revenue. That's not going to change, right?
Yep.
But the deal you need to make with customers is that you're just not going to try to support every single one of those you put out in perpetuity. In fact, what you want customers who are looking for stability, they have what they need, it's working, they just want to run their business and enjoy the benefits of using whatever it is your thing is, right?
Right. Yep.
And so you have to make a deal with them which says, okay, here are the versions that we're going to support, and we'll support you there with critical defect fixes and security vulnerability response, and we will never ever add new functionality to that version.
Right.
And it's like I said, it's not all the versions that you put out. It's you got to establish a cadence that says it's a good idea to just kind of go by year, to say, look, for 2023, this is the version. You can stay there if that meets your needs. We'll support you there. And we're going to keep going. Right. But this one, you can stay. Now, 2024, you come to 2024, you say, okay, now moving forward, you can stay on this one. You can continue to stay on that 2023 because we're going to support you there for some period of time, which you need to define.
Right.
But the point is, your customers get to the point where their priority is stability, prevention, and security vulnerability response. And you have to react to that.
Absolutely.
You have to understand the position they're in. It's like, it's a reasonable position.
Oh, clearly, and I'd say enterprise class customers will exacerbate that problem. I'd say companies that are using SaaS products, I think they go into it already knowing that they will you can do some of that, but not as they know it's like their product is going to be upgraded continuously without them knowing it, as long as there's no impact to them. So but they do a better job with microservices and fencing off different features and things like that. So but yes, it's an absolute problem that we could probably talk forever about. So, okay, I want to come back now. So,
Yep.
we've identified that people are doing a lot of busy work. They're looking at, they may not be looking at the right metrics. But so they talk to Dave, and Dave gives them the recommended, hey, you have to have, better requirements, better discipline around your agile, better test strategies and better test plans, and better, DevOps strategies and DevOps plans. And, so they've drinking the Kool-Aid, and they're on their path to wild success. So I get the question is, how long does something like this take? And what are the benefits that companies should be expecting? Because, this world of immediate gratification, I want something now and fast, right? So what's been your experience?
Yeah, right. It's the old, okay, we just said a lot of stuff, right? So that sounded like a pretty big elephant, right? And
Yes.
if you insist on eating an elephant, it's still one bite at a time, right? So
Exactly.
so where do you start? And I say you start by tackling individual disciplines. You start with some philosophies of I don't believe my pass rate tells me what I need it to, right? Just start there. Great
Yep.
starting point.
Yeah.
I don't believe it. That's really sufficient. Start digging into the tests and the test plans. Start to adopt these other disciplines of I don't want to defer because I'm exposing technical debt. Just don't want to do that, and I'm hampering my future velocity. And then start with again simple things like, man, if you don't have a management visible Jira dashboard where you can see this is the project, this is the sprint that's current, these are the stories that are in that sprint. These, I'm an advocate of story points. I know not everybody uses story points, but okay. And look for the disciplines of, am I really accomplishing? Am I meeting the definition of done? There's another good one. Just really read your definition of done, right? Start there. Just read it first.
Yeah.
What's it really telling you?
Yeah.
But
One other thing you mentioned also was is getting the getting the folks downstream, the quality engineers, DevOps engineers, to understand the customer requirements. Like it's not just to know what the product design requirements or what their manager told them requirements are. it's what are the customers' real requirements?
right.
Because they're the last ones that touch it before it goes out the door. They usually get the blame, then none of the glory. So how do they how do you get them more involved in understanding those customer requirements?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, and again, you're starting with requirements decomposition and analysis, and that's not strictly a development function. That's actually a cross-functional activity to understand what are you trying to do here.
Right.
What are the set of objectives? What are the set of use cases? And I said it before, it's not only what are the requirements, but what are not the requirements.
Right. I
Really?
remember. I always walked around with two lists in my hands.
Yep.
The same way as what am I going to do and what am I not going to do?
Exactly.
So great. So one of the things that I look back in some of the hey, we've changed all the busy work to more effective and efficient operations, software development operations, and I look back at and some of the metrics that I found have been just absolutely phenomenal. And they were subtle changes, for me, when they asked me, okay, if I, do my agile, discipline or transformation, and people don't like that word, but if I do agile implementation and we do all of this test automation and we automate our delivery process and health check and environment check and really start to focus on the non-functional or customer requirements, what do I get? Well, what's my payback? And
you get a lot. You actually get a lot. And
you do.
So, some teams or some companies, especially hopefully if they're in the cloud services business, they've got a site reliability engineering team. So it'd be a good idea to get some metrics from your site reliability engineering team about what's happening, what are they fixing, right? A good SRE team, they have two responsibilities. One is getting the customer out of trouble, and two, making sure that never happens again. Whatever it takes to make sure, writing code, changing code, putting up, fences, whatever, right? So be in touch with that team. And many times there is not an SRE team. And in fact, the more and more that's customer managed stuff, you see the customer actually doesn't have an SRE team.
Right.
So then you need to start looking at what's happening in the services world. What's happening with your incoming contact rate? What's happening with your escalation rate into engineering? What's happening with your impacts, your customer impact rate? How much, again, if you've offered a service, there's a set of capability that you delivered in that service. And my view is, whatever it is, it needs to be completely working. If it's not, then you need to understand why that happened and how do you keep that from happening again, and what is the deficit that you have that allowed that to happen.
Exactly.
And by the way, sometimes the deficit goes all the way upstream to the sales process where you sold something that was not fit for purpose for the customer's use case, but everybody was chasing the revenue.
Well, that hardly ever happens.
Oh yeah.
So hey, I have some metrics for you that I think you will enjoy to hear. So when you and I were together, we implemented a number of those all of the changes that we discussed, and the ROI that I looked back over 2 years was 67% increase in test execution coverage cost. 67%. It was amazing. We reduced defects by over 90%. Customer escapes. We went from a couple hundred down to around 20 over the time period. And we increased the number of product releases from 6 to over 90, which is over 93% increase in velocity.
Right.
So, it took us really, to achieve that, it took us a good 2 years.
It did.
But I would say, a lot of companies can expect, within a year, they should certainly see improvements within the year. But I'd say 18 months to 3 years, depending on size, complexity of the company, organization, product that you're doing, maturity levels, funding levels. If you've got it all together, I could say, a good range of expectation is, 18 months to 2.5 years is a good range to expect a transformation from a laggard to a competitive edge, to competitive advantage.
Oh, and absolutely, disciplines go right to the bottom line.
Yep.
Preserve your profit.
Yep. It goes absolutely. So, Dave, we're getting close to the end of the time, and I know there are so many topics that we started to talk about that we had to pull back on.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll reserve an invitation for you in the future so we could do this again. But I really appreciate your time today, your thoughtfulness, and any last words for this audience to walk away with.
I guess the last words would be all of this is accomplishable. right? We're not talking about scaling Mount Everest. We're just talking about you can improve your business and improve your bottom line through application of structured disciplines. It works.
Awesome. Awesome. That's phenomenal. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. And thanks for those who attended. And we'll see you in upcoming LinkedIn Live sessions. Thanks again, Dave.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Yep. Bye-bye.